Chapter 11. Some Kind of Plan. After hearing the muffled shouts coming from outside, the three young recruits looked up in surprise as the two senior dragon masters came strolling back in with big grins on their faces as they glanced over toward their secret weapon. Ben swallowed hard. Am I in trouble? He asked worriedly. No, not at all, Simmons chuckled. Ben glanced nervously toward Torin. Torin never smiled, but right now his face was lit up like a jack-o'-lantern. You're good at alchemy, right? Ben hesitated. I think so. Torin's smile faded, and he became very stern as he leered down at him. Yes or no? Yes, Ben said quickly, not sure what Torin was talking about, but he didn't want to disappoint him. Simmons grinned. Do you think you could change a slab of granite into sandstone for us? Ben grimaced. Sandstone is really complex. I could turn a granite slab into something else. Preferably something more uniform and still mineral-based, he offered. Torin cursed and picked up an empty chair. Master Torin, you put that down this instant, Nim scolded him. The wooden backing creaked and whined underneath the tension, until finally Torin quelled his rage and neatly set it back down on the floor and stalked off outside and let out a blood-curdling roar and commenced ripping up a sapling from its roots and began threshing it against the earth. What did you want to change a slab of granite for? Ben asked. Simmons offered a nervous, polite smile towards Magi Nims and then glanced over toward Ben. Well, we needed the granite floor into something soft enough so that we could do a little remodeling is all, he explained. How about limestone? Ben suggested. Simmons shook his head. That would still take too long. Not if you use vinegar to dissolve through it. With vinegar, you'll cut through the stone like cheese. But I don't think I can do the whole floor. Only small portions at the time. That'll do just grand. All we need is a few holes for some pikes and crossbows under the floor, he guffawed. What for? Ben asked. Simmons glanced over to Torin, who was now peeling the bark off the sapling with his teeth. We are planning to trap the bull drake inside the lobby, he explained. The one that attacked Master Frey and killed her dragon, he asked. Simmons took in a long, deep, cleansing breath and nodded. The same, he said at last. I will make some holes in the ceiling up top and on the sides as well, Ben declared. Nims frowned. You are not to be doing this tonight, are you? She demanded. We'll do what needs doing, same as you, Simmons insisted. Ben quickly rose to his feet. Magic Nims had helped him recover from the concussion, but he still sported a large red mark from the knife across his chest. It was not bleeding anymore, but it still promised to give him some irritation. But it has been healed enough where the scarring would be barely noticeable. Broomier grinned as he sat up. What are we waiting for then? He asked. But before he could get out, his eyes rolled back and he fell into his bed. Magi Nims returned her wand into her sleeve and gave him a rueful shake of her head. Magi Simmons, where do you find these shovel-heads? You're worse than the fools beating their brains out in the sparring grounds, she muttered. Her sharp eyes darted toward Ben, but he quickly hopped behind Simmons before she could knock him out as well. They're a good lot, Simmons chuckled. Milo grinned as he hurriedly slid the rest of the scones into his shirt. Thank you again, Nims, he called back to her. Torin, Simmons called. What? He demanded. You feel better yet? He asked. Torin paused. I think so, he grunted. Simmons grinned and gave Ben a wink. So I was telling Ben about my idea of luring the dragon into the lobby. That was my plan. You wanted to get a weather mage and blast us all to bits, Torn growled. Well, Ben and I made it better, he teased. You see, we'll turn the granite into limestone and dissolve it away with vinegar. It's still my plan, Torn grumbled. Unfortunately, when they got to Founder's Keep, as much as Simmons and Torn were excited to share their plan with the rest of the Dragon Masters, it quickly became apparent that the 6 were not all on board, and no matter how excited Simmons tried to appear or how much Torn shouted, there was clearly a large divide. Cora, their elemental mage, who had been close friends to Nora Frey, was in full agreement. Adar, Irene, and Warren, on the other hand, staunchly disagreed. The mood was tense at the round table after Don Rascal had died, so had the sense of unity amongst the 8, and with Nora Frey exiled to Helvisti, their divisions only increased. If we're going to do all this effort to trap the dragon, why shouldn't we try to tame it instead? Irene demanded. Were you going to sing it a song? Torn scowled. Irene's face flashed red with anger, but Solsman was quick to stick up for her. Master Torn, your uncivilized rhetoric will not be tolerated. We are equals here. I feel we should at least try to save it. We are dragon riders after all. I did not join to become dragon slayers, Warren agreed. Torn grunted as he sat back and propped his boots onto the table and pulled out a pipe. But when he could not find his lighter, he began gnawing at the stem, crunching it in the back of his teeth until it finally broke, and commenced to chewing like a very hangry beaver. Simmons sighed. It seems it's 3 against 3, and whatever we decide, we must decide quickly. If Nora were here, she would have wanted to kill that bulldrake, Cora scowled angrily. If we counted her vote, things would be settled. Irene was not swayed. If we are counting people that aren't a part of this table, Don Rascal would have wanted us to try everything to save it first, not kill it dead on arrival, she shot back. Don Rascal is dead, perhaps even killed by the same dragon that attacked Magi Frey, Cora insisted. There were no markings. He could have merely had a heart condition and falling off, Warren shrugged. Yes, and I suppose his dragon just flew off without him, Simmons agreed sarcastically. Killing the dragon won't help anything. If we bring it in, if you give me a chance to tame it, we could be up a dragon, not down too, Irene insisted. If we gave you a chance, we could be even more short-handed than we already are, Cora snapped angrily. Wait. I'm not saying we shouldn't be ready to put the dragon down. We should most definitely be prepared to do so, and plan to. I just think it shouldn't be the first thing we do, he insisted. At least give her a chance, Adar agreed. Irene nodded. That is the only thing I want. I just want a chance. That is all. Simmons glanced over toward Torn. What say you? You're the senior of the group. Torn shrugged and spat out the broken pipe into his hand and stuffed them into his pocket. Let her try, he grunted. Irene beamed happily as she ran over and placed a quick kiss onto his forehead before the grouchy old vet could wave her away. Torn, she'll get herself killed, Cora snapped at him angrily. Then we won't have to worry about having any more ties, will we? He scowled. Cora's eyes widened with indignation. Relax. Torn is just joking, Simmons insisted. Well, nobody is laughing, Cora snapped. If things go wrong, we'll be ready, Torn growled irritatedly. If something goes wrong, she and many others could be dead, Cora warned. I only request an hour to lure it down and see if the bull drake can be coaxed into the holding area. If I can do that, please promise me you will not kill him, Irene insisted.
Fine, but you'll be on your own. Don't drag anybody else into this,
Torn agreed.
Unbelievable,
Cora cursed angrily. After all this, after losing Golden Eyes and Nora, you want to bring this beast and sing it lullabies. I would like to try, Irene insisted. Simmons grimaced. All right, you can try, he agreed. But we have to be ready if things go wrong. You know that, right? He insisted. Irene nodded. Of course. I'm not a child, Master Simmons. But dragons are not monsters either. I believe I have proven myself as a dragon soother. I believe I deserve a chance to try, she insisted. Adar smiled. If such a thing can be done, it would be you who could do it, he agreed. Torn grunted. All right. Well, Irene tunes her harp. The rest of us have lots of work to do, he growled. Chapter 12. No Rest in Dragon Hall. There was no rest to be had in Dragon Hall. Every recruit was called out to barricade the stables with rocks and sand. Meanwhile, a crew with bottles of vinegar, picks, and shovels followed Ben around as he focused on metamorphosizing the hard granite into small limestone channels to be chiseled away into a grid of murder holes inside the entry, ceiling, and floor, so that they could shoot crossbows and thrust spears into the feral dragon when it was trapped inside. Ben, did you hear about the dragon? May exclaimed. Ben gave a tired nod before turning up a clay water pitcher to empty half into his mouth and spilling the rest down his shirt. He was so tired, but there was so much more to do. Yeah, we are going to lure it inside, he grunted. May stepped away. But Ben, they're going to kill it! Ben shook his head and gave her a tired smile. Not if Master Irene can help it. She is the best dragon soother in all of Glendon, probably all of Marne, he assured her. But Master Torn and Simmons are right. We have to prepare for the worst. May smiled and gave Ben a hug. I heard about what you did, she whispered. Please tell me that you didn't hear about that from a dragon, he groaned. May ruffled Ben's fuzzy head. Everybody's talking about it, she giggled. If it wasn't for Brumir and Milo, I would have been dragon scat. I should have been more careful. Brumir could have died, he sighed. But May only laughed. Careful! I never thought I would hear that from a dragon rider's mouth, she teased. Ben frowned. It was like May hadn't been listening to a word he had been saying. You haven't been around here that long, and I'm not a dragon rider, he grunted. May grinned. Dragons are terribly dangerous, she teased. Ben felt his stomach turn as he remembered one of the senior recruits' heads being torn off. At the time, he had only been focused on saving Brumir, but the image in his head made him pale as he tried to keep his empty stomach from purging out the water he had just drank. Ben, are you all right? Meg asked. He nodded. Yeah, I'm just tired. You should take a break, May insisted. Ben shook his head. No, I can't. I have to finish. Everyone is depending on me. We have to get those arrow and spear holes carved out. May frowned. She had seen overzealous apprentice mages die from overcasting before. It was always the natural-born mages, too. The wizards that had tapped into their abilities early didn't know any better. There was no real hard number for overcasting. For every mage it was different. It was sort of like running. Some people were just born to run. But eventually, no matter who it was, fatigue would settle in. Only in this case, overcasting went from simple fatigue to dropping dead. Mages could go from laughing and carrying on one moment, and the next second be a lifeless, pale corpse. It didn't matter how big or how small, or if they were male or female. When a mage overcast, there was no remedy. There was no cure. When it happened, they just dropped dead. But Ben, don't you remember what happened to Maya? She was the mender who tried to save Nora's dragon, but they both ended up dying. You won't be any use to anybody if you overcast, she pleaded with him. But Ben was stubborn, and he would not be swayed. May continued. She tried to reason with him. But you said Master Rivers was going to save the dragon. We are going to save the dragon. We don't need all of this. This isn't necessary, May insisted. Ben shrugged. Simmons said she was going to try, and she has only been given one chance. Master Torn, Cor, and Simmons are pretty keen on making sure the Drake is put down. Do you think I could go with her, May asked. Master Irene? I don't think she likes to talk to people much, and definitely not to us recruits, Ben grunted tiredly. There was then a woman with long jet-black hair and piercing green eyes came around the corner, cradling a harp in her arms. Everyone held their breath as Irene glanced over toward them. Before Ben could stop her, May ran out and blockaded her path. May I come with you? She pleaded. May gulped. I meant, may I please come with you, Master Irene, she corrected herself. Irene wanted to be angry, but then she wondered, if things went horribly wrong, what would the young girl think of her? What would be the final words in the young girl's mind be? I was just like you. Patience, everything in due time, she assured her. The young female recruit was not swayed. Please, I don't want to kill the dragon either. Please let me help with something besides killing dragons, May begged. Irene gave the young girl a calm, serene smile. No one wants to kill dragons, she assured her. I'm a graduated mage. I could help talk and soothe the dragon, she insisted. Irene shook her head. It is too dangerous. The others would not approve. Please, just let me have a chance. I gave up everything to be here, she begged. As did we all. I took this burden upon myself. Therefore, I will go alone, and I will do my best, she insisted, and stroked the young recruit's flushed cheek and gazed into her eyes. They were now full of tears. Be brave. No matter what happens, we all must do our part, she whispered, and then turned away and walked out the small door that led to the large landing bridge that stuck out of the cliffside over the waves crashing against the rocks below. May fought back frustrated, angry tears. When she turned around, Ben opened his arms and attempted to console her, but she darted away. Ben was about to call after her when Simmons came. How are things going? How much do we have left? Simmons inquired. Taken by surprise, Ben glanced about and quickly regained his focus. So what's taking so damned long, recruit? Torrin growled, but Simmons gave his friend a hard glare. Magic is not easy. I'm impressed that he has accomplished as much as he has. Considering everything, Simmons scolded him. A fierce, unsettling chuckle rumbled from Torin's chest.
Fine, because I was going to give him the day off as soon as he was done, was all.
I want to stay, Ben insisted. Simmons arched his brow and frowned. You're running a fever. You should be getting bed rest soon, he warned. I want to see this through, Ben insisted stubbornly. Torin grinned and presented Ben with a spear.
You're pretty damn tough for a mage. Try not to die, he encouraged him.
Ben grinned. Torin wasn't the sort for compliments, and he knew it was likely the only one he was ever going to get. Once the last channel was carved out, he met up with Milo, who was drowsily standing by the narrow window with his crossbow, gazing out toward the bright ribbon of light slithering across the horizon. You don't look so good, Ben, Milo chuckled. Ben smiled. Yeah, well, you look like Dragon Scat, he teased. I feel like it too. I still can't believe this is happening all in the same night, Milo groaned. Have you heard anything about Brumir? Ben asked. He is supposed to be at Mender's Hall, Milo remarked, landing an accusatory glare toward his friend, quietly resting on a wooden crate. Ben turned. Brumir! We had to carry you all the way down to Founder's Keep. What are you doing up here? He demanded. Brumir offered a sheepish grin. I wasn't tired. Besides, I had to bring you guys some jelly scones, he declared. Ben smiled. Where are they? Well, it was a long walk, Brumir confessed. Ben laughed. Glad you're doing well. Me too, Brumir agreed. Besides, I can't miss this, he insisted. I love it when Master Irene plays her harp, he grinned. That's because you have a crush on her, Milo teased. Brumir gave a dismissive shrug. Who doesn't, he laughed. Milo grinned. I don't. She always complains about everything, and I think she has a funny nose, he declared. Brumir's face darkened, and his jaw set like granite. She does not! Milo was about to make another snide comment, but the heavy metal pickaxe in Brumir's hand quickly sobered him. Son of Maltine, Brumir! I was only playing, he exclaimed. Brumir smiled. I'm getting a better view. You two coming or not? He called back. Milo grinned, and Ben's eyes lit up as they hurriedly followed after him through the winding staircase until they were on top of the lookout tower that looked over the landing bridge down below. Master Simmons and Torin all turned and frowned as the young recruits awkwardly shuffled in. Recruits aren't allowed up here, Torin growled agitatedly. Simmons. It's only Ben, Milo, and... Brumir! Torin growled. I won't tell anyone, Brumir promised. You better not, Torin agreed, before grouchily turning away and went back to scanning the horizon with his looking glass. Simmons sighed. I suppose since Irene is breaking the rules, we can too, he remarked, and gave Brumir an inquisitive glance. Aren't you supposed to be in Mender's Hall? He demanded. I feel fine, Brumir assured him. So, about that reward for saving everybody, Milo ventured. You get the best seats in the house, Simmons announced. Milo grinned. Any snacks? He asked. Simmons grinned as he passed a bowl of salted peanuts. Of course. Help yourself. Without thinking, Ben quickly intercepted the bowl, and only after cramming his third heaping handful into his mouth did he realize how hungry he was. You really should be sleeping, Ben, Simmons remarked as he passed the young mage a wineskin. Milo nodded as he picked through the meager remains of the peanuts and turned to offer the rest of the crumbs to his friend, but Brumir was too busy leaning on the stone merlons, smiling dreamily as he stared down at Master Irene. What happens if things go wrong? Brumir asked worriedly. Torin grunted as he examined the large barbed javelin, the tip before sliding it into the place of the giant crossbow ballista.
Depends how wrong they go, he remarked.
Simmons nodded. If the dragon gets too aggressive, then Irene will retreat back inside and take cover with the rest of the recruits, he explained. What do we do? Milo asked excitedly.
Pretend like you're invisible and don't get in front of the big crossbow, Torin instructed.
And run like hell if we do, Simmons added. Can it get into here? Milo gasped in surprise. Simmons grimaced. If Torin hits his target, I'm very certain it will try. Ben glanced over toward the powerful crossbow limbs set at full tension.
I don't miss, Torin muttered.
While most might have thought she had run off to go cry in her room, May hadn't gone far at all. The wind whipped across her face as she wedged herself out the narrow window and slowly began ebbing her way toward the landing bridge. May's initial plan was merely to get a better view, but after she crept closer and closer, she felt compelled to do more. Perhaps she could scare the dragon away or warn it somehow, but that meant she had to get closer. May could communicate telepathically at a distance, but only with animals or people she was familiar with. She crept inch by painful inch until there was no place to hide. With each held breath, she darted from hiding place to stone column by stone column. May's heart pounded as she pressed her cheek against the rough granite and peered over at Irene, who was now meditating only a stone toss away. At her feet was a peculiar, ornate, stained wooden box. After several minutes, Irene reached down and picked up the box and strode 8 paces away from her wooden chair and set it down. May's eyes went big when she saw Irene lift the lid. Inside, she could see the top of a shimmering violet crystal sphere. While the charms certainly looked magical, its sole purpose was to sparkle. Such a charm could be seen for miles on a sunny day and would catch the eye of any dragon that was flying overhead. When Irene turned to go back to her chair, her face went pale and her green eyes went big with surprise. May wilted behind the stone pillar. "What are you doing here?" Irene demanded. "Being brave," May squeaked. Irene's head swirled toward the gate and then back toward the stone pillar where the recruit was hiding. If she told the stupid recruit to go back, the dragon might swoop down and snatch her up right as she was running away. Swift movements instigated the dragon's prey drive. "Please don't be mad. I'll go back," May suggested. Somehow she hoped she could mitigate the trespass to a mere beating and not be thrown out of Dragon Hall entirely. "No! Get over here right now and sit on the ground. You're in big trouble," Irene snapped. May slunk out from behind the pillar. "Sit down! Keep your eyes on the sky and say nothing," Irene commanded sternly. May beamed up at Irene. "Thank you," she squeaked. "Don't look at me," Irene snapped at her. May drooped her head and glumly stared at the sparkling dragon charm. "I said, keep your eyes on the sky," Irene snapped impatiently as she examined her instrument. "If you're here, you might as well watch to see if it comes behind me. Whatever happens, keep quiet and don't run," she instructed. May bit her lip as she quickly tore her eyes from the bright, shiny orb and refused to look at the bright horizon or fixate on the beautiful waves on either side of her. But just as she turned her gaze upward and spotted both Ben and Brumir inside the overwatch above the gate, staring down at them with tense concern and worry on their faces. Still angry with Ben, May pretended not to notice him. Instead, she smiled back upward toward Brumir and gave him a not-so-discreet, tantalizing little finger wave. But Brumir didn't so much as blink or turn his head to notice her. May followed his gaze, and what she saw filled her with horror and rage. May stared helplessly at Irene's rich, luscious, black braided hair that reached all the way down to the small of her back, and the nice, clean, black and blue tunic that it rested on. May felt her face and ears burn for the first time. Being bald really hit home. Before, she had practically reveled in the newfound freedom, but now, son of Maltine, she wanted to chop Irene's silly braid off and strangle the dragon soother with her own harp strings. This thought surprised her, as only moments ago May had been idolizing and adoring Irene. "Are you frightened, child?" Irene inquired. May quickly wiped the tear from her face. "No, of course not. I'm," she insisted, as she frantically glanced about, trying to come up with some kind of permissible excuse to be upset about. "You are frightened for the dragon. I understand," Irene confided. "Yes," May agreed, weakly, grateful for the easy way out, when a swirling gust of wind sent the faintest scent of lavender soap tumbling up into her nostrils. Knowing full well that she had been only using stringent lie, only served to remind her that it wasn't hers. She knew she was being silly, but at that moment the thought of comparing her bald fuzzy head and stained gray garments next to Irene was intolerable. But all those silly thoughts vanished the moment she heard the pulsing thresh of great wings and saw the black silhouette rush over the stone bridge as the large bull drake flew past them. While the dragon was still high above them, May was astonished at how big it was. All eyes turned back toward Irene as she ran her fingers through the harp. The great bull drake wheeled round. It was coming back. May turned her head and gasped as the dragon blotted out the sun with its massive wings. May felt like a speck. She felt a wave of dread as it swooped down toward them. She didn't know dragons could grow so big. Such a bull drake might kill off half the colony if it was let inside. The landing bridge trembled as it neatly touched down. The great dragon's glowing silver eyes were fixated on the sparkling charm placed in front of it. His talons rasped and clacked against the stone as it gingerly moved forward to acquire the orb. Once the dragon took possession of the charm, its demeanor quickly changed, and the dragon's attention turned and flashed its massive maw of teeth toward the two humans sitting in front of it. At first, taunting them, a loud, throaty, rumbling growl reverted off the cliff walls. Without any challengers, and quite certain that the object now belonged to him, the bull drake excitedly cracked his tail and let a cackling chortle. May watched in terror as the dragon cocked its head to the side, glancing away from the orb and then down toward Irene. His large nostrils flared with interest as he took in their scent. The dragon was now so close that it could crush them both in its jaws as it curiously investigated the peculiar musical human and its assistant. May closed her eyes and cleared her thoughts, curious to see if the dragon would sense her mind and attempt to communicate with her. She would not press to break into the dragon's consciousness. No, that would be far too dangerous. She was just making herself known. Right away, May's mind was flooded with a torrent of strange smells, sounds, and images. Dragons did not speak like humans, and she quickly found herself overwhelmed. May struggled to find something in common, something they could both relate to. The shiny orb. She did her best to convey that it was his now, and that it was a present. This did not go over well. If the dragon expressed its feelings into words, it would have been a very definitive mine. May quickly realized the very suggestion that she was giving the bull drag anything was implying that she was claiming ownership of it and didn't see him as a threat, which he found to be very patronizing, and that he should eat her. May couldn't help but giggle. The dragon flashed its teeth, but the moment it tried to snap at her, Irene swatted him over the snout with a polished wooden stick with a knot on the end. May wasn't sure what she was more startled by, Irene's response, or the surprise and horrible burning sensation she felt up in her sinuses. It really hurt. Irene calmly set the ornate blackthorn wooden club back next to her knee and resumed playing the soft, sweet, calming melody. Sensing the dragon's hurt and sudden desire to burn them all to a crisp on the spot, May tried again to get his attention. "What's your name?" she called back to him. The glowing furnace faded, and all the great bull drag's rage fizzled out in the form of twin tendrils of black smoke and bluster that billowed out of its nostrils. While the ancient dragon didn't speak at all like the others, she clearly got the sense that he thought he was, somehow, very upset that she didn't know. That she should know it already, that everyone knew his name. The dragon's scales were deep black, yet at a certain angle of light they shimmered with a bright cobalt blue, much like a raven. "I will name you Raven," May announced. The dragon responded with a roar of protest. May quickly realized her mistake. "But ravens are so beautiful, and ravens are very smart," she insisted. The dragon responded by smashing the crystal orb into a million pieces. "You won't get another one," May informed him. Raven blinked and glanced about the crystal fragments, clearly flustered and upset. "Perhaps we should think about moving back inside," Irene whispered in a low voice, but May was far too interconnected with the dragon that she had not heard or noticed Irene. The ancient dragon was so prideful and silly that it was now trying to imply it had smashed her charm and there wasn't anything she could do about it. Somehow, suddenly, he had decided the charm was hers again and not his anymore. "What if I smashed your things? How would you feel?" May demanded. Smoke funneled out of the dragon's nostrils. Its large, stormy gray eyes blazed with anger. May crossed her arms and turned away. "I'm very offended," she announced. Raven's long talons scraped against the stone, leaving large scratch marks as he attempted to push the broken shards back together. All eyes watched in absolute dismay as May stubbornly shook her head, refusing to accept the pile of bits and pieces as compensation. Raven let out a deep, frustrated, angry growl. Irene placed her hand on May's shoulder, beckoning her away from the dragon. But just when it seemed as Raven would rip them all to shreds, the dragon dove off the side of the stone landing bridge, and its powerful wings sent it soaring back into the sky, until finally the sound of threshing wings faded away, and there was nothing but a speck on the horizon. May sighed and dutifully stooped downward to begin putting the broken fragments into the wooden box. "What did you do?" Irene demanded. When May glanced up, she was surprised to see Irene's face gaunt and ashen with worry. She began. She wasn't sure what to say because she wasn't entirely sure either. "What did it say?" Irene demanded. May bit her lower lip. She began. It was difficult to translate what non-human creatures were saying into words. There was so much information to pick through, so much that were no use to humans at all. Such things about the wind, the weather, the smells, angles of the sun, air moisture, humidity. All this from the more recognizable, how dare you call me a bird, look at my big beautiful wings, be afraid, I'm smarter than you, you don't even know how to fly, lots of sparkles, it's mine, go away, how dare you even call me a raven, I hate your stupid rock, I'm sorry, this is stupid. Before May could begin to unpack all that had happened, Simmons and Torn, along with all the other Dragon Masters, came running out onto the landing bridge. Magi Simmons was the first one out the door. Master Torn managed to plow through everyone else and come up behind him as a close second. "What happened? What did it say?" Simmons asked. "He was very rude," May announced. Her attempts of looking calm, cool, and collected quickly evaporated as giant, mangled hands grabbed her by the shoulder, and she found herself staring up into Torn's scarred, scary face. "Is it coming back?" Torn demanded. May felt like she was going to melt, but Irene quickly stepped in. "I want another try," she declared. Cora cursed angrily. "We agreed on one. One and only one try. It attacked Nora. It killed Golden Eyes. It will kill again," she shot back angrily. Warren quickly shook his head in disagreement. "But they successfully contacted the Bull Drake. If we bring it in, we could send Prince and Rex to another colony. This could be a wonderful addition and a chance of discovery," he insisted. Torn grimaced.
"We're already short-handed. We need to be on patrol. Every day we're not in the sky. The whole northeastern coast is vulnerable," he growled. "It wouldn't be permanent," Warren assured him. "We can quickly adjust once Irene tames the Bull Drake."
Irene shook her head. "I wasn't making any progress at all. The dragon's entire focus was on May," she explained. Cora's dark eyes blazed with anger. "Don't be stupid, Irene! Don't you drag this girl into this! It's fine if you get yourself killed, but this is beyond despicable," she scowled. But when no one else looked over toward her or raised their voice in support, she cursed at them angrily. "Her bloody, ashen corpse will be upon your heads, not mine," she shouted, and turned to go back inside. "Its name is Raven, and I'm not a little girl, you stupid cow!" she shouted, and then quickly clapped her hands over her mouth. The air suddenly became dry as the desert. Fire blossomed from Cora's hand, and then she turned. Torn folded his arms over his chest. Irene snatched May, and everyone else piled up behind the hulking black mountain of scars and leather like pages stacked behind the book cover. Satisfied, Cora extinguished the flame and walked away. To May's surprise, when the hulking, scary bear of a man turned back around, he had a big, white, toothy grin on his face. "Fine! If it comes back, one more try," he agreed. It was then the blast of a horn came from the gatehouse lookout tower. "It's coming back!" Broomer shouted. May gasped, and she turned. Yes, the dragon was coming back. It was a mere black smudge on the horizon now, but it was getting closer, flying low and coming in fast. Irene frowned. "Broomer? When did he get back from Mender's Hall?" she demanded. Simmons quickly turned over to Torn and gave him a look of shock and disapproval. "Yes, I thought he was supposed to be resting," he gasped. Torn rolled his eyes. "You two mind your own business and just focus on not getting eaten," he growled. May grinned. She felt like a fountain of butterflies were trapped inside of her. While the others hurried back inside, she held her breath and waited for Raven to make his landing. Irene gave her a reassuring pat on the shoulder as she took her seat and pulled her harp back out and began to play. Well, that was fast. What do you suppose your dragon is up to? Irene remarked as she plucked the slow, calming melody. The music was as much to calm May and herself as it was to soothe the big bull drag barreling toward them. May squinted her eyes and put her hand over her mouth as she giggled. "He's got a fish! A giant fish!" she marveled. Irene glanced up. It did have a fish. An enormous marlin that was almost the size of Torn wriggled and flopped in its talons. The closer it came, the more the marlin's distinctive profile came into view, with its sword-like nose and sail-like fin and wondrous scaly body that sparkled in the sunlight. The great black bull drake landed neatly onto the bridge. Raven pranced over toward May and flopped down the fish in front of her. May took a step back as the slimy fish began to spastically wriggle about until Raven expertly used a talon to sever its spine and end its life. Clearly satisfied with itself, Raven glanced over toward May and then down at the fish, clearly expecting something from her, but she didn't know what. Irene kicked May in the shin. "Don't be rude," she whispered. "Ouch! May blinked. Oh, what a big and beautiful fish it is," she marveled out loud. Somehow she was getting the impression that Raven was trying to compensate her for the priceless, broken crystal dragon charm. Well, in the dragon's mind, it felt that it was being far too generous to the silly human. "How did you catch it? It's so big," May remarked. Raven tilted its head, clearly baffled by the human's stupidity. May turned to Irene for help. "Why don't you ask if Raven would like to come inside and have a nice ash bath?" she suggested. May bit her lip. Would you like to come inside?" she offered. Raven perked up, but the dragon seemed hesitant. "We'll bring you lots of ash and a goat," May offered. While she spoke, she projected the images to the dragon so he could understand her. Raven craned his neck down, snatched up the large fish into his jaws, unfolded its wings, and wandered through the open gates into what had been outfitted as the kill room, which was now being loaded with the fresh ashes which came raining down from the arrow holes. "Well done," Irene praised her as she put her harp away. "Now for the hard part," she mused out loud. "Hard part?" May exclaimed. Irene smiled. "Not so hard," she assured her. "What do we do now?" May asked. Irene smirked. "I'm going to get something to eat, and you're going to stay with the dragon." "For how long?" May gasped. Irene shrugged. "Until we are sure it won't eat anyone else." May wasn't sure whether to be happy about this or not. She was so excited and so overwhelmed at the same time. She had only thought she was going to be Irene's helper for a little while, and then go back to her normal routine, and then curl up in her cot at the end of the day like she always did. Raven chortled happily as ash began pouring down from the channels above him. May grasped at Irene. "Please don't leave me. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know anything about dragons. It's huge. Dragon riders are supposed to work with hatchlings, not giant, man-eating bull drags. What if it won't listen to me?" she pleaded. Irene quirked an amused eyebrow. "And you will think it will listen to me, do you?" she remarked. May suddenly wanted to take Irene's harp and throw it off the landing bridge. "This isn't fair. I'm not ready," she exclaimed, but Irene continued forward into the courtyard, where she paused, smiling at the dragon and then to May. "True," she agreed. May's jaw went slack, but before she could object, Irene stepped through the heavy side door. "You can't," she began, but the door was locked. May wanted to burst into tears. She wasn't ready. It was then a familiar voice called out from above. It was Ben. Good job, May, Ben called down to her. May's smile vanished when she saw the basket being lowered down. First came bristle brushes, mineral oils, salt crystals, a flat shovel, a rake, and a myriad of other tools. But what about me? She called back up the narrow stone hole in the ceiling. Food and water and clean clothes are coming, Ben assured her through a tired yawn. Do you need anything else? Milo asked. May wanted to claw Ben's eyes out. She wanted to rip his still beating heart and feed it to the dragon. She was furious. No, I don't. I'm fine, she snapped back at Milo. No, I meant for the dragon, Milo insisted with a silly grin. May stalked off and sulkily planted her bottom over by a sandbag and stared helplessly at the enormous bull drake. Raven chortled happily, not even noticing her as he snapped at the steady stream of ashes being poured in from above. May had always wanted to be a dragon rider. She had hoped to get a hatchling, something cute and cheerful and happy to see her. Instead, she was now trapped with an ill-mannered monster. And worst of all, she had no one else to blame but herself. She wondered what she would do. She had nothing to compare this to. Perhaps a horse. A giant horse that would eat her and fly off. No, this was not a horse. More like a giant cat with wings. Only instead of bringing her birds, she would get giant fish. Son of Maltine, what was she going to do with the fish? It was huge. It was going to smell, and she couldn't get rid of it without upsetting the dragon. For now, it would rot and smell at the place until she could figure out how to distract him. That part wouldn't be too hard. But somehow she knew this was going to be the first of many giant fishes on her doorstep. While May began plotting how to get rid of the horrible fish, she spotted something very alarming. Broken bits of arrow stuck out from this thick underbelly. She picked up a brush with a long pole handle and quietly approached the dragon, and gently at first began brushing him along his neck. This was greeted with happy thrums that resonated through the stone lobby. Those happy noises were encouraging and brought a smile to her face. Perhaps a little like a horse then, she thought. Horses loved being brushed. Perhaps she could slowly build a relationship with Raven after all. She proceeded until she reached the frayed arrow tips. The dragon didn't so much as blink as they fell away like loose scales. May gulped. She had hoped that possibly she could find a way to bond with Raven like she had with Prince. Raven needed nothing, and would stay as long as he found it entertaining. May couldn't help but selfishly wonder what it would be like if Raven just flew off. Then things would go back to normal, and she could go back into her own warm, cozy little bed, and then she would wake up and go back to being a recruit. May bit her lip. If she tamed Raven, she would be able to grow out her hair. She remembered coveting Irene's rich, full black hair. If she tamed Raven, that could be her. Well, she wouldn't have black hair unless she dyed it, but still, the only other way was to quit and find a position as a mage in some dull, stuffy library. But that wasn't nearly as dreadful as going back home to her family and seeing her mother gloating with supreme satisfaction. What would be worse was that May would have to lie and admit that she just changed her mind and that her mother was right because she wouldn't be able to tell anyone that she had gotten everything she had hoped for. She had gotten a dragon, and then ran back home like a spoiled little girl that had insisted that she could ride by herself, and then quit the first time her horse tossed her into the mud. May closed her eyes. She couldn't quit. Not now. She would either fail and go back to being a fuzzy-headed recruit, or tame Raven and become a real dragon rider like Irene. Yes, she would be like Irene, and she wouldn't ever let herself be a bitter, jealous, rotten snood like Cora. May bit her lip. She stared up at Raven. Tame. Perhaps not tame, but she had to at least convince him to stay. Even if the massive gates closed on him, he would eventually claw and burn his way out. There wasn't anything keeping him if he didn't want to be kept. May's eyes darted over toward the giant fish. Oh, gross. How was she going to get rid of the fish and keep the dragon? Hey! May exclaimed, but there was nothing she could do as the raven snatched the brush away, and with each munch he turned it into a pile of wooden splinters, and after a few thoughtful moments, spat it out. May hurried toward the door and began banging on it. No one answered. May stormed toward one of the small stone windows in the wall. Magi Cora smiled back at her. May felt her stomach churn into a bunch of knots. Cora was the last person she wanted to talk to. May glanced around, but there was no one else. "Where's Irene?" May demanded. "Master, Irene is in the banquet hall, celebrating with the others," Cora replied calmly. May frowned. "What are you doing here, then?" "Watching. Do you need anything?" Cora asked icily as she turned her attention back to her book. May swallowed hard. "Can I talk to Master Irene? Raven just ate my brush," she protested. Cora glanced up from the book she was reading and took another sip of her tea. He must be hungry. You should feed him," she remarked. "With what?" May demanded. Cora licked her finger and gingerly turned a page. "Seems like your dragon likes fish. He brought you a fish. It would be nice to have a dragon that can catch fish. That's one thing about tame dragons. They do get so very lazy," she sighed. May wanted to scream. "Where is Irene? I need to talk to her," she demanded. "Irene won't be available until tomorrow. I'm on first watch. Do you have any other questions?" Cora inquired. She turned another page. May's thin nostrils flared, and she quickly brushed away some tears. She was so angry and upset, yet the only one she could talk to was the person she had just called a cow. "I'm sorry I called you bad names. I need help. I don't know what to do," she sniffed. But Cora was not fazed in the slightest, and never once looked up from her book or away from her tea. "Would you like a goat to be sent in? Goats are expensive, but this is your dragon. If it's easier, it can be arranged. Is that what you want? Why don't you try the fish?" she asked dispassionately, like she was talking about butter on toast. May turned away. To her front was the dragon, and behind her was Cora. "The fish is just lying there, stinking up the place, and Raven won't eat it," she sniffed. "Have you tried cooking it?" Cora asked. May crossed her arms over herself. She hated Cora. She was always hate Cora. "My dragon likes cooked food," Cora shrugged. May bit her tongue. It was a giant fish. It would be impossible to cook it all. Cora was just being cruel. Cora sipped at her tea. "It's the smell of the food that dragons like. Even if you cook a little bit and toss it onto the fish, he will eat the whole thing. Would you like me to help you?" she asked. Tears flooded down May's face, and she quickly bobbed her head up and down. "Oh, please, please, Magic Cora," she begged. Only this once, child, and then you'll have to use a frying pan like everyone else, Cora assured her. May gasped as suddenly the giant marlin burst into flames. Excited by the fire, Raven happily dragged the fish over to his new giant ashen mound and began chomping it down. Do you need anything else? Cora asked. May quickly shook her head, but Cora stuffed a pillow and a blanket through the hole anyway. Thank you, May squeaked. Cora responded by sealing off the hole in the wall with a wooden stopper, ending any and all conversation for the night. May wanted to hate Cora. She really did, but the more she tried, the more silly she felt. She sighed and ran her hand over her bald head, her poor bald head, and then glanced over toward the dragon, whom, after eating, was now growing lethargic. Dragons really only needed to eat a large meal once a month. Everything else was just for fun and purely out of predator instinct. Horses were so much easier. Dragons were not at all like horses. No, they were more like large cats. May wondered what Raven thought of humans. May felt like a mouse trying to make friends with an owl. Now that she had gotten the owl in the barn, she had no idea what to do next. Somehow, she had a feeling nobody else did either, and everyone was just surprised that they had gotten this far. The ocean wind that came through the gates into the lobby was bitter cold. Even with the blanket and pillow Cora had given her, May's teeth chattered through the night. When she was a child, she had dreamed of falling asleep, curled up in the warm, velvety folds of the dragon's wings, but she wasn't ready for that yet. Raven was still very new. She didn't want to scare him. No, that didn't seem right. Raven wasn't scared of her at all. As far as she could tell, her big bull drake had just made its nest and set claim to all of Founders. May couldn't help but wonder where the large dragon had come from. Typically, the young fledglings were pushed out into the lower valleys and occasionally became local pests to farmers and townsfolk. It was so odd for a bull drake like Raven to be out here near Founders. Not unheard of, but still, it was very strange. May wondered how old the dragon was. It would be absolutely horrible if he just curled up and died on her. A big, cranky, luminous silver eye fluttered open and lazily peered over the berm of compacted gray ashes. May bit her lower lip as a dragon lethargically circled several times over, readjusting itself. She didn't need to be in its mind to realize what was going on. You didn't need to eat it all at once, she chided him, and she was rebuffed with the image of her trapped inside an egg. May frowned. I'm still mad at you, she declared. Both eyes flickered open, and Raven's head emerged from above its wings. Another image was sent of a fish. May responded with the image of a broken, long-handled grooming brush. A low, flustered growl resonated through the stone lobby. I don't want another fish, May shot back grouchily, and stubbornly shook her head at the offerings. A piece of driftwood, a ship wheel, a large fishing buoy, a large rock, a bigger stick. I want to
Chapter 1 Helvisti. Nora took in a deep breath as the ship sailed out of the harbor and tugged at a long fur overcoat to block the cold wind as she turned for one last look back at the city.
But somehow she doubted that would happen any time soon.
Digital.
cool thing about this book is that you can share it with your friends. And you know J.R. Tolkien. Would you like to write him? You can't. He's gone. J.K. Rowling. You probably could messenger. She's a busy lady. She might get back to you. But me, I am here to entertain you. I am not just a writer. I am a glee man, if you will. And I do podcasts. I do audiobooks. So not only will you get this audiobook, you'll get all the other stuff that I put out on YouTube. And the most important thing, a sword. The most important thing, there will be dragons. There'll be lots of dragons. And most fantasy books, dragons have gone extinct and they're gone. These dragons are very much here and real. So there will be dragons. So Founders Keeps, fancy fiction, magic, mages, swords, true love, revenge, dragon audiobooks. Follow me on Twitter, Dragon Audiobooks, YouTube.